Good morning, everybody. My name is Anthony Bullen. I'm the owner and broker of The Collective. We are a residential and commercial brokerage in the greater LA area. We have a great panel for you today. Today, we're focusing on multifamily investors. So if you're thinking about purchasing a multifamily property now or sometime in the future, or own one, this is going to be a great session for you. There's been a lot of changes and a lot of updates, as you know, that are going on day by day. We have updates on 1031 exchanges. We have lots of landlord-tenant issues that we want to talk about as well. So first, I just wanted to start by welcoming everyone and letting them know that if you do have any questions, right at the bottom, there's a Q&A button that you can ask. We will definitely do our best to answer all of those questions. Also, I have a poll that I'm going to launch now. We're very interested to see from any property owners out there, how many of your tenants have actually paid rent in April, what percent? And then what do you expect in May for your tenants to have paid rent? So what percentage, the question actually says, what percentage of your tenants did not pay rent for the month of April? So I'm launching this poll right now. So feel free, if you are an owner, to take a look at that at any point and answer that, and we'll discuss that later on. That would be great. And also, if you have any links or anything you'd like to share with the group, feel free to put it in the chat section. You can chat with individual panelists or you can chat with everyone. So make sure that your drop-down arrow, when you do put in the chat, says who you'd like to share to. If you have to sign up early or you miss anything, we will be posting this on our YouTube page at The Collective Realty. And I believe we're live on Facebook right now. And we'll be broadcasting there. But if you want to reference anything later on, you definitely can. Please reach out to Will or I if you have any questions and you need to get any more detailed contact information on any of our panelists, and we'll make sure we get that to you as well. So some of the things that are going on right now that I just wanted to make sure people were clear on. Councilmember Ryu has been in the news a lot, and with our Greater LA Association of Realtors, we had him on our webinar yesterday. And there was a lot of realtors who were upset with some of the comments that he might have made recently regarding asking for renters to have their rent completely forgiven. So he clarified where he was coming from on that. And what I understood was that he knows and he's clear that a city council or a state cannot say that rent can be forgiven. It's a federal issue. But what he is trying to do is to make it known federally that he would actually like there to be more, if than the next stimulus package, more money going towards landlords so that their mortgages possibly forgiven, and if they are, that they would pass down the rent forgiveness to the tenants. But it would start at the landlord side. So he clarified that first, which we thought was very positive and good news. So that was his voice and his opinion on that. So I thought that was important to share. If you have a property that's listed now or are looking to possibly purchase a property, we'll talk about the possible great advantages that could be going on right now in buying a property. There is a form that we're asking everyone to sign, excuse me, with the California Association of Realtors. It's basically a property advisory and entry declaration. As you enter a property, you'll notice that the realtor is going to have you sign this. Basically, it's just saying that if you enter this property, you're entering it at this point during our pandemic at your own risk, that you agree that you're not sick at that point, and that you won't touch anything, you'll have a mask on, and you'll hold basically the seller and realtors and everybody harmless. You're entering at your own risk. So this is a form that's required that everybody will be signing. If you have a listing that you're trying to sell, make sure your realtor gets that form signed by everyone entering the property. I would advise it also for inspectors, appraisers, anyone at all, not just possible buyers. At this point as well, if you are thinking about listing a property, no open houses are allowed. However, every city has different rules for showings. So pretty much would be able to get you in to see a property. There's a lot of rules. However, if there's a tenant in the property, maybe Anthony, our attorney, can expand on this a little bit more. A lot of the advice that we've been giving in guidance is if there's a tenant, it's going to be really hard to force them to show that property. So a lot of associations are advising that if you do have a tenant in the property right now while we're on lockdown, that you don't show that unit until this is over. Now, if you're in an escrow, that's a different story because it's more essential at that point. But again, this is something that you're going to have to talk to your attorney about to decide, you know, how much you want to push trying to get into a unit that's tenant occupied right now. If a unit is vacant, most cities are perfectly fine with allowing a realtor to show, and the realtors obviously have their guidance that they'll let you know on how to stay socially distant and clean and all of that while they're showing the property. But if it is a vacant unit, that's much easier, and you are able to go in to see that. Real estate is considered an essential service right now. We're just doing business a little bit differently. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce our commercial director, Will Tiao of the Collective Realty. And he is going to introduce our first panelist today and has a few other things he'd like to share. So Will, take it on.
Hi, everybody. As Anthony said, my name is Will Tiao. I am the director of the commercial division at the Collective Realty. I specialize primarily in sales of multifamily, aka apartments, and mixed-use properties. I also have a property management company called Tiao Properties. We manage a little under 200 units, 200 doors. So, you know, very much on the front lines and very excited to hear from our panelists today about the various things, you know, things that are going on. I think all of us who are in this know that right now it's a very challenging time for landlords and for people who own commercial property. You know, it's a challenging time for all of us, right? I mean, these are unprecedented times. And so, and the federal government is doing, you know, some bits and pieces here, but there's no real coherent strategy, it appears, you know, from the federal, state, and local levels. We're getting all sorts of different messages, you know, from, as Anthony was just alluding to with Council Member Ryu, we're getting one message from him, but then he's telling us, well, he's really trying to, you know, influence the federal side. So it's very confusing. And for those of us who are in it, like literally it feels like day to day, we see something new come up. One of the things that's been very concerning for a lot of apartment owners is that there's a bill, Senate Bill 828, oh, I'm sorry, it's Assembly Bill 828 by Phil Ting of the Bay Area, talking about doing an across the board 25% cut in rents across the state, regardless of whether or not the property is already under rent control or not under rent control or whatnot. You know, there's just all sorts of like ideas out there that just like I said, don't totally make sense, or at least don't make sense in a larger strategy of things. So, you know, please, you know, obviously, if we're doing our best to track everything that's happening here. Feel free to reach out if you guys have any questions. We do have obviously a Q&A section below. I saw that somebody's raised their hand. You know, we would highly suggest just put your questions in the Q&A or the chat, and that way we can, you know, we can try to get your questions answered. Now, how are we seeing this affect the commercial market, like the multifamily investor market? Well, so far, I mean, what we've seen, and I mean, this was said in the in the LA Times just yesterday, was that, you know, sales of both residential and commercial are down, you know, a lot. There have been a number of cancellations of sales, but that said, prices have not come down that we've seen that much. That said, I'm starting to see some of my owners, some of my clients come under pressure and feel that it's time to sell. So I'm going to present two properties right now that we have. One's already on the market, one's going to be coming on the market, just to give you a sense of like what we're seeing. So I'm going to share my screen. Oh, it says host disabled attendee screening. Can you help me?
Uh, okay, you should be able to now.
Okay, great. Thank you. There it is. Okay. Okay, so this is kind of more of a classic thing that we listed this just last week. This is more classic of what we saw kind of pre-pandemic, pre-COVID. It is a 5-unit turnkey, completely renovated building in Westlake, just south of Echo Park in Silver Lake. 4 of the units are being delivered vacant. 1 is rented at market rent. The front building is a 4-plex. There are 2 3-bedroom, 1.5 baths, 2 2-bedroom, 1 bath, and then in the back is a single family house that's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. As I said, 4 of the units are being delivered vacant. 1's being delivered at market rate. The cap rates, at market at 5.39. And a GRM of 14.12. So what I'm seeing here is that we are getting some bites. It's definitely not what we would have seen before. It's that, but that said, there are still some people who are in 1031 exchanges that we're going to be talking about, as well as other cash buyers that are looking. And I focus on cash buyers because financing right now, particularly for places with vacant units, seems to be a little bit of an issue. So I have noticed that in the market. So there is that. Now this is an example of a property that where the owner is under distress. She has decided that, with what's going on, she has decided that she wants to sell this property. This is a duplex in El Sereno, which is near Highland Park, Monterey Park, Lincoln Heights, and just kind of east of downtown Los Angeles. And there are 2 units. One is both are 2-bedroom, 1 baths. There's 4 parking spaces, so there's parking for each of the units. There's 1 unit that's being delivered with tenants. That's their long-term tenants. And the bottom unit is being delivered vacant with and it's been remodeled. And we had originally been planning to rent this out when the owner contacted me and was like, I just feel like I want to, I feel like the cash flow pressure is a little bit too much for me right now. I want to sell. So this is an opportunity for people. I have not listed this yet. We are going to be listing this at 525. Which is, obviously, any of the LA market, it's a steal, to get 2 units at 525, especially with 1 unit vacant. So, so it's perfect for owner, user, or whatnot. So if any of you have any interest in this, obviously feel free to reach out to me. I'll include my information below. Now beyond that, let's get into our panelists, because I'm really excited I work with both of these individuals on a professional level, and they're both amazing professionals and great people overall. So I'm excited to introduce them. Let me first introduce Dino Champagne of Asset Preservation Inc., which is a 1031 exchange accommodator. For those of you who have been members of our group in the past, you've seen Dino before. She has come to speak to our group. She is the 1031 exchange guru. You look her up online, you will see her talk all over the place and this is what she is known for. And there have been some changes recently to 1031 exchange dates, and that's what she's come to talk to us. So I'll give it on to you, Dino.
Good morning. Thank you, Will. Well, I think the last time I saw you, my hair was a bit shorter. I think everybody's going to be lining around the block to get their hair cut and colored. Anyway, I hope everybody on this call and this video is doing well and staying healthy and building that immune system. What I'm here to talk about, like Will mentioned, was the recent changes to the 1031. When President Trump declared a national emergency on March the 13th, there were certain tax things that were pushed back, but 1031s weren't addressed at that point. And one of the big issues when it comes to 1031 tax deferred exchanges is you have a specific time frame in which you need to complete the exchange. So you have the 45-day identification period and then the 180-day calendar completion of the exchange. Both time frames start at the closing of the sale. Well, with this current pandemic, that's become a huge issue. I would be getting calls daily saying, have there been any updates on 1031s? Are they, extending, if you will, the 45 and 180 days? Well, it wasn't until April the 9th that the IRS came out with a notice, IRS Notice 2020-23, which addressed extensions for the 1031. Basically, what that means is what they came out with was that if your identification or your 180-day fell April 1st or beyond, then your extensions are to July 15th. Now, let me just sort of give you a little bit of what that looks like in actual situation. So I'm going to give you a few examples. If someone closed on their sale, say, for example, on January the 3rd, their 2020, their 45 days would be February 17th, and then the 180th day would be July 1st. In this example, the 180th day is now moved from July 1st to July 15th. But regrettably, they cannot alter the 45-day identification period. So I'm not sure how much that helps them, but that's for anybody that closed, say, roughly for the first 2 weeks of January. Now, if somebody closed on February the 3rd, their identification period would have been on March the 19th. Their 180th day would be August 1st. They're not benefiting from it because their identification period fell before April 1st, and their 180th day falls after July 15th. Somebody closes on February the 16th. Their identification period was due April 1st. Their 180th day is August 14th. In this example, that taxpayer's 45 days is now extended to July 15th, but their 180th day is not moved because the 180th day falls after July 15th. So as you can see, there's certain people that are going to benefit and not benefit. Now, as an industry, we have gone back for further clarification and for asking for more extensions. And when I say as an industry, I'm talking about the Federation of Exchange Accommodators, along with the National Apartments Association, the National Association of Realtors, and a whole bunch of other trade organizations where 1031s are very important to their industry. And because what Will mentioned earlier, it's difficult to get out there and do those inspections. Lending is becoming difficult. We're looking to see if we can get an additional extension to the 180-day, 45-day period. So these are the things that we're working on in the background. Anybody currently in an exchange, check with your qualified intermediary to see how you're dealing with, how your transaction works with these extensions. And I'm just going to wrap up by saying, as an industry, we're watching what's going on. And it's a political year, even though you're not hearing a lot of politics right now. I mean, I should say election information, the candidates going up and back because we're dealing with the pandemic. But we are in an election year. We have to look to see what's going to happen potentially in the future. There's a lot of money that's currently being spent. They're calling it a stimulus, but I'm not sure if it's stimulating anything if no one can leave their houses. But with that being said, how do you pay for all of this? So there are things on the horizon that may be coming up through Congress, mark to market. I think Joe Biden's position is to eliminate 1031s. There are tax increases from capital gain to ordinary income. So there's a lot of things on the forefront that we as an industry are watching. So we need to be paying attention because 1031s are very important for investors because it definitely helps the economy as well as the investors are continuing to do what they're doing by investing into real estate. So that's my little quick update on what's going on with 1031s. And to note what Will said, yeah, we have seen a drop in volume too because people are either pulling out of deals because they're feeling that maybe not, they're not comfortable selling right now or they're not comfortable buying right now. And some are having actual issues with getting financing. So interesting times in which we live. I guess what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. So keeping the faith.
Thank you, Dino. Really, really great information. If anyone has questions, again, put them in the Q&A and we'll make sure we get those answered. I just wanted to remind everyone, we do have a live poll that I'm going to leave on for another couple minutes before we send out our second poll. Our first poll is asking what percentage of tenants did not pay rent for the month of April. So far, 63% have said that all tenants have paid. Almost 20% have said 10% or less have paid. And about 20% have said 10 to 20% have not paid. So if you haven't answered that, we'd really love your feedback. And then we'll post a poll on what do you expect for May. All right, Will.
Yeah, so I'll add my 2 cents to that. Out of my units, 90% have paid. So that means we have a 10% delinquency rate. So, and then in terms of what we're expecting to see next month, we're expecting that to double, roughly based on what we're hearing. Because we've already had tenants already reach out to us, tell us that, a lot of people were able to pay April rent because they worked at least half of March, but now it will have been a full 6 weeks since some people have worked. So, so we're fully expecting those numbers to rise, and I think everybody's bracing for what the May number is overall. What I heard is that nationwide, about 33% of tenants didn't pay. In LA proper, I'm hearing roughly what in the 10 to 20% range is what I'm hearing. So now let me introduce our next speaker, and he will probably have even more numbers because he represents lots of landlords, and he himself is a landlord. So he can talk to us about his specialty is landlord-tenant relations. He is really he's the information that Anthony is, I think, going to talk to us about is stuff that we all need to know, whether we're landlords or tenants. It's going to be really critical in the months ahead. So, Anthony Marinaccio.
Good morning. So I figured I would start by talking a little bit about evictions, because I know that's probably what's on everyone's mind, and particularly non-payment for non-payment cases. The biggest issue right now in California that you're going to see, and this is statewide, is that a landlord is going to be unable to file any sort of eviction for 90 days after the state of emergency is lifted. The state of emergency, since we don't have a date yet, your guess is as good as mine about that. And so we would not be able to, we would be able to file the eviction. We wouldn't be able to serve a summons on the eviction. So a tenant would not have to file a response to the complaint, meaning that you would be sitting on the complaint for at least 90 days until the summons gets issued. So it would probably, most likely, evictions will probably start up again in the fall for anyone that is currently in an eviction. So if you had filed the eviction in February or early March, expect very long delays. Most likely the courts are going to be closed until the middle of June, meaning that, or at least the trial courts will be closed until the middle of June, meaning that any sort of movement on an unlawful detainer will not be going until the end of June, early July. The only type of eviction that is allowed at the moment are those that involve public nuisance. And so it's very limited as to what exactly that means and how that would proceed, given that we can't have a trial date until the end of June. There are tons and tons of local moratoriums. The biggest ones probably that are most prevalent are the city of Los Angeles and the county of Los Angeles. Both of them are sort of similar in that they allow a tenant to not pay the rent as long as it's COVID-19 related, the reason why the non-payment is occurring. And that tenant would have up to 1 year from the date of the emergency ending to pay the rent. The city of LA and the county and pretty much everyone is encouraging all landlords and tenants to talk to each other and to at least try to get into some sort of payment plan regarding the rent that is due, because although it might seem like it right now from the city and from the county and from pretty much every government entity, there is no rent forgiveness. There might be very long payment plans that involve no interest, no late fees, and basically kind of free money for a year to float around. But at the end of the day, tenants are still going to owe that money at a certain point. And so in terms of collections, a payment plan might be the best idea. Although the tenant or the landlord are not required to enter into any sort of agreement. However, a landlord knowing that they can't file an eviction for 90 days might push some landlords to actually enter into some sort of agreement if there is some rent that is due. With regards to other kinds of evictions, in the city of LA, for example, landlord cannot file an eviction at the moment or even serve a notice if there are additional occupants in the property or pets or a nuisance if it's COVID-19 related. So for example, if an additional occupant is in the unit and somehow there's a connection to COVID-19, the landlord would not be able to serve the notice and pursue an eviction for that reason. With regards to, and this is all for residential units. In the city of LA, the city is not requiring any tenant to actually provide documentation. So I know right now a lot of landlords are asking that information. A tenant is actually not required to provide it. In the county of Los Angeles, so if it's outside the city of LA, you actually, a tenant has to provide a self-certification. And that's pretty much the only thing they would have to provide. So they don't even have to provide any other additional documents showing the financial losses. As a landlord, on the landlord side, I am recommending to most of my clients to talk to your tenants, suggest to them all of the government programs that are out there that are throwing money everywhere at them. So including unemployment, stimulus checks, there's the Angelino card in the city of LA. I believe there's some rent programs that are coming out now that will help pay tenants rents. And so there's a lot of things out there that might give tenants some money. I know there was a big article this week involving lots of police calls between landlords and tenants on April 1st, and I expect that to be much worse on May 1st. You know, I encourage, everybody's under a lot of stress. I get where everyone's coming from, but it's always encouraging, and I encourage everyone to try to talk to each other. Most tenants, in most of my clients I'm experiencing, and most of the tenants that I'm experiencing, people are not intentionally or maliciously trying not to pay the rent or do something in violation of a lease. It's a very strange time, and I think I'm trying to encourage most of my clients to at least talk to each other before serving notices, because at this point, serving notices isn't going to get your money anytime sooner than if it was a normal situation. I do expect when the courts do open up in June, and when you're even able to file those evictions later in the summer, expect very long delays. I generally told most clients the average eviction was taking anywhere between 8 and 11 weeks, but I would highly expect that once this is all over, the average eviction, you're looking at more than 3 to 4 months, probably close to 4 months, if not longer, by the time the sheriff goes out there. And some other things that are going on in evictions. Currently, the sheriff is not doing any lockouts. So if anyone had any sort of judgment from before COVID-19, so let's say you entered a judgment in February or early March or even earlier than that, and the sheriff had not actually gone out there to do a lockout, they're not doing any lockouts at the moment. And so that's important to note if you've been in an eviction. With regards to notices, I'm encouraging clients to not do the notices so soon at the moment, and to try to encourage people to talk to each other in order to actually get some sort of resolution. When it comes to partial payments and any sort of payment plan that you come into, for a landlord, it is very important that they keep very good records, because many of you may already know that the 3-day notice has to be correct as to how much rent is owed. And when landlords start accepting partial payments, particularly if it's cash involved, there can be some issues involving that. So it's very important to keep receipts and very good records of the amount that's being collected. Outside of City of LA and outside the County of Los Angeles, there are less restrictions on evictions. So I'm finding less in San Bernardino, Riverside, and Orange County. But there's still some cities that have imposed some eviction moratoria. In addition, City of LA and the County of LA, there's a lot being said about rent freezes. I'm not really sure any landlords that were actually raising the rent at the moment, but a landlord cannot raise the rent if they wanted to until after the pandemic is over, or until at least the state of emergency is lifted, which hopefully will be next month. And although the City of LA is actually allowing the city to landlords to actually give the notice and make it effective after the pandemic is over. City of LA and also the county, but in particular for the city, if you had any sort of eviction involving the Ellis Act, owner occupancy, building violations, those are considered no-fault evictions. And right now, the City of LA is not processing them, and they're not allowing landlords to serve notices or pursue those type of evictions. So that's another big area that if you had an Ellis Act or owner occupancy type situation and the period ended right now, you can't do anything about it until the courts open up again, or until the Judicial Council allows evictions to be filed. So that's kind of the lay of the land for evictions and for non-payment, at least. Even if there are violations of the lease, right now you can't pursue those evictions. So you could still serve the notices. Just be careful with regards to accepting rent after. If you do want to pursue, if a landlord does want to pursue a violation of the lease agreement, it's important that they serve the notice and maybe not collect the rent at that point, which is why I'm encouraging landlords probably not to serve those type of notices at the moment. That's pretty much all that's going on with evictions and with the moratoriums and also with rent freezes. Hopefully this all passes sooner and we can get moving on proper rent collection. Some of the issues, though, I do know when we do get back into this, there's going to be a lot of issues with the delays in the court system. And so again, I'm encouraging landlords to try to work with tenants, and hopefully when things open up, they can get back on their feet sooner than later, because that is important. Some other issues that are kind of coming across right now that I'm getting calls for. A lot of tenants are calling regarding trying to reduce the rent for common areas that are not being allowed. So this would be, for example, pools, gyms, other kind of common areas that right now you're not able to use because of the pandemic or because of a government order shutdown. And at the moment, most landlords are not doing anything about that. And I don't think there's a legal justification to lower the rent for those reasons. But another big issue are leases. And I'm finding some tenants wanting to get out of leases. That's another big issue, and that I think is going to be a bigger issue for commercial tenancies, which I'll talk about in a minute. Because most likely, in my opinion, the pandemic cannot be used to breach a lease. However, the law is a little unclear on that, and I think that's where some issues are going to come up. With regards to commercial tenancies, if you are occupying a space or you own commercial property in which you're renting, commercial properties are also under several eviction moratoriums under the City of LA and also under the county. The City of LA is allowing commercial tenants 3 months after the pandemic or after the state of emergency ends to pay rent that is owed. More so for commercial tenancies, if you are the tenant or the landlord, if this is your business or you're owning the property, again, I would encourage people to talk, because I think for commercial tenancies, the coming wave of vacancy is going to be pretty high. So it might be worth trying to work with what you have and trying to come up with a payment plan for those tenants. Quite honestly, from what I'm hearing from a lot of people, the commercial properties are going to be much harder hit than residential. Most of my clients in the city of LA, particularly for rent control properties, almost all of them collected almost everything. In some of the other outlying areas, they didn't. But commercial properties, most of them are already saying that for May 1st, they won't be able to pay the rent because they've essentially been closed for over a month. But again, because you can't file the eviction as a landlord, they can't file the eviction. There's going to be some delays, even if a tenant is unable to pay the rent. And I'm saying that because I do represent a lot of tenants in commercial spaces. And so if you are concerned about paying the rent to your landlord for your business, there are also lots of programs out there that the government is throwing money at, including the PPP program and others that might be able to assist you pay the rent. And I would encourage any tenant that is unable to pay the rent to talk to your landlord before May 1st or before the rent is due, because I think talking about it is better than ignoring the problem. The landlord generally hasn't forgotten about you. And so that's important to remember. And I think I'm going to leave it open to questions, I think, if anyone has any. Will?
So there was one question somebody asked. What happens if there's overdue rent and tenants do not pay during the 12-month period? Is there anything the landlord can do besides use the security deposit? I've heard various things on this, Anthony, and I'm I know there's talk about converting the tenant past due rent into consumer debt, which would then take it out of eviction court and into small claims court, which is obviously much more difficult to collect. Do you know anything about this, and what are your thoughts?
So generally, an eviction is essentially a proceeding for possession because you want the unit back. But if you have a situation where your tenant has actually moved out and they just owe a substantial amount of money, you can actually sue your tenant for the damages and for all the rent that is owed. If it's under $10,000, you can actually go to small claims court. If it's over $10,000, you would have to go to a regular court to file suit. Some landlords intend to do that, some probably won't. Judgment collection against tenants is sometimes a little difficult, particularly if they were unable to pay the rent. However, there is a possibility for that. But the only time you would really sue a tenant for breach of contract would be if possession is no longer at issue. If possession is at issue, although you could actually sue a tenant for the rent that is owed, I would probably not encourage it, just because it wouldn't. A landlord generally wants the property back, not money that's owed, and or paper judgment. But yes, that is a possibility. The only issue is going to be, and I know a lot of landlords are mentioning this, $10,000 can add up. The number 10,000 is important because if it's under that, you can go to small claims. If it's over that, it would go into a limited court, which makes a big difference to your client's costs. And I expect some balances owed will be very high very soon. But the security deposit can be used for 1 month or whatever it is, and after the tenant has moved out, that can be used to make payment. And so it would basically be after you subtract the security deposit, whatever's owed, you can sue the tenant for that. And that is, it would be a judgment, and you would be able to pursue that by garnishing wages, seizing bank accounts, or real property if there is any.
I know that we're trying to work out payment plans with our tenants, the ones who can't pay this month, and the concern is obviously as the longer this continues and they're unable to pay for subsequent months, they're going to get 1 month, 2 months, 3 months behind. At that point, will they ever be able to catch up? I think it's very unlikely, especially if they weren't working during that time. So there's a lot of concern I'm hearing from landlords that, are they eventually going to have to shoulder this themselves, and especially since, they really can't, at least in the city of LA, they're allowed to stay, tenants are allowed to stay in their units for at least the 12 months and have at least 12 months to pay for it afterwards. So there's a huge concern that there's going to be a huge cost burden shifted onto landlords is what I'm hearing. But I'm curious what you're hearing as well. And then there's one other question here. If the tenant agrees to a higher rent due to improvements such as a plank floor or AC system, can you go past the rent control limits outside a rent controlled city?
So I'll say first regarding the debt. So yes, unfortunately, I do see that happening. The landlords are probably going to have to shoulder a lot of this in the next few months, particularly if this lasts longer than May. But with regards to the question for Mr. Ritchie, generally you cannot waive rent control laws. However, if both parties in writing would agree to something like that, I don't see an issue. However, generally you cannot waive rent control laws. So there is an argument later that a tenant can say, you violated rent control laws. Generally, in order to do something like that, I would probably recommend actually disclosing to the tenant all of their rights, and that legally you would not be entitled to raise the rent. Although you would be able, in the city of LA, for example, with the flooring or the AC system, you would be able to use the capital improvement program, which generally I would encourage to use as opposed to a handshake agreement. And I see from Ms. Wong, what is a good payment plan? What if the tenant won't sign? A good payment plan, well, a good payment plan is one that both parties can agree to, probably. And so I don't really have one. It just depends on how much rent is owed and what sort of plan the tenant has. Again, when it comes to payment plans, I'm really encouraging landlords to tell tenants about unemployment issues, and if they're not qualified for unemployment, they may even have other ways to get unemployment if they weren't technically employees. This week they're opening it up. I believe California is opening it up for independent contractors. If a tenant won't sign, unfortunately, a tenant doesn't have to sign, and so you would not be able to force a tenant to sign anything. In particular, I forgot to mention, talking about payment plans, the city of LA, when entering into any sort of payment plan, I would highly recommend, and it is required in the city of LA, to provide the notice that's on the Housing and Community Investment Department website regarding all the rights a tenant has under COVID before you actually enter that plan. But if the tenant won't sign, unfortunately, they don't have to. Probably a better way to get a plan in action is most likely to probably stretch those payments out a little longer, and that might do it. But the problem would be that just delays it. And then the other problem with the rent and any sort of payment plan, and I'm sure most landlords realize this, is in addition to whatever's owed for April and May, rent is still going to get accrued on June 1st, on July 1st, August 1st, and what to do with those kind of rent payments as well. So I would encourage a landlord that's going to enter into some sort of payment plan to have an attorney look at it. And another big area that kind of came up in the news a few weeks ago, we had some landlords that were going around and maybe not telling the whole truth about what a tenant's rights were. And I don't encourage landlords to lie or to strong arm a tenant into signing something that maybe they don't want to. There are some pretty draconian results with the city of LA if there's harassment or misrepresentations being made. So I would not encourage a landlord to lie or to misrepresent any of the rights that are under the COVID-19. And I do encourage landlords and tenants, if things are getting a little too intense with in-person meetings and possibly even phone calls, maybe try to use email or text messaging. Sometimes it's a little bit better so that it's all in writing. So I know sometimes things are getting, and I expect in May to get a little more heated between landlord-tenant relations. And another big area that I know a lot of attorneys are concerned, a lot of tenant rights attorneys are concerned about, is a landlord cannot turn off utilities. They cannot turn off, or they can turn off utilities, or they cannot change locks on their own. No landlord should be doing without a court order. And I know a lot of landlords are saying, why should I have to pay the utility bills when if a tenant's not paying me? Unfortunately, as we speak, California law does not have an exception if a tenant doesn't pay you. And when it comes to maintenance requests, I also know that a landlord does have to keep the property habitable, but I do know that a lot of property management companies and a lot of landlords are encouraging tenants to really only have maintenance men go in if there's a very necessary repair as opposed to cosmetic or something they've always wanted. So something to think about.
Agreed. I just want a quick question for Dino. I'm just curious what you're seeing. You know, are you seeing, you know, on your end, like more deals on the 1031 side because of what's going on, or are you seeing deals seize up? Or I'm just curious what's going on, what you're seeing in the marketplace.
What we're seeing right now is more deals. It's slowing down. I mean, you know, it's definitely slowing down. With the extensions, it's helped people have a little breathing room, because what they were concerned about is what they're going to buy. When you're buying a replacement property in an exchange, you're buying what? The tenants. And you've got all these issues going on with the possibility of not paying the rent. Shopping centers have their issues. So obviously office buildings and the like. So, you know, people are a little bit hesitant. So I think with the extensions, it's helped a bit to give them a little breathing room, to give them some possibility of where they can potentially identify. If we're able to get the additional extensions, it's going to give a lot of breathing room. So we're waiting to see what's going to happen on that end. But I also see folks going into that are wanting to sell right now, because I agree with you, Will, I'm not seeing values dropping, okay? And so you want to take advantage of the values that are still here today, you know, that they're going into maybe a single tenant triple net deal, which is, you know, with a good, strong tenant, or going into a Delaware statutory trust where they're getting, you know, changing over, you know, and not to say that some DSTs haven't had their issues, because they're in real estate too. So which DST are you going into? Probably not an office building, probably not hospitality, okay, probably not retail. So it's going to get a little more specific in that. So right now, I would say, yeah, the brakes they've been pumping the brakes for sure. We'll see what happens in May, keeping our fingers crossed. But does that answer?
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Dino. One other thing I wanted you guys just to consider, I was on a call with the West Hollywood City Council a few days ago at their last meeting. And what they were talking about was, you know, as of now, there's a rent moratorium for the April 1st payment, right? May and June. So on June 1st, on those 3 months. However, we don't know how long we're going to be in this lockdown mode where people won't be able to work, that they wanted to vote on extending the moratorium for another 2 more months. So it would give people a chance to catch up. And they mentioned that they would have 12 months from that date of missed rent to pay for the missed rent. So unlike LA and many other cities where it's 12 months from the beginning of the pandemic, it's 12 months from when the actual missed rent was. So they didn't vote on it. They were going to wait till their next council meeting. They meet every 2 weeks to talk about it more and see if there was anything that the state or LA county was going to do. But that's definitely something that they all seem to feel in favor of. So just keep that on your radar. You know, these things are changing all the time. City councils are meeting every couple weeks, and we really need to stay up to date for this. So we'll continue to have our meetings and update you guys. But that's definitely something to think about. It might not just be a 3-month rent moratorium. This might be extended as people aren't able to come back to work. So now I wanted to bring on Mitch Silvers, who's an investor, multifamily owner, just kind of bringing you back to someone who's actually on the floor, real life examples of what's going on and what we've talked about today and how it's affected him and what you've seen and what you've been doing. So Mitch, let me unmute you. Go ahead and yeah, fill us in on what's going on.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you. I want to share with you a couple of things. Really, it's for rental properties, it's how do you get through this pandemic with your tenant? Anthony pointed out very well, communication. Dino alluded to it as well. You need to communicate with tenants. If your rental properties are run by a management company, there needs to be a definite relationship created where, you know, there's a person there that's really talking to them. Let me go on to the, I'm sorry. So everybody is very anxious. This is a factor, and including the landlord, including the tenant. These people have lost their jobs. If you have a good relationship, if you've built one in the past, the stronger your relationship is with your tenants, the harder it is for them to let you down. But if you know, we need to have some compassion. We need to understand. We need to stay calm, and we need to try to, you know, help them to help ourselves. So one of the big things, obviously, is these tenants who have lost their jobs or are sick are not paying some rent. I have one of my tenants happens to be a vice president for food and beverage for a major hotel chain. They laid him off. I mean, he's a vice president. There's nobody at the hotel. So, you know, this is one instance where of my tenants where he came to me, explained to me that his wife was also unable to work. She's an interior designer. She can't go into people's homes now. You know, what could I do? And we talked, and I agreed to, you know, for April and May that, you know, he would have a rent break, which made an impact for him, and that we would discuss it again at the end of May to see how he would pay it back or where we stood or if this needed to continue. Just keeping the line of communication open and treating with compassion, I think goes a great way towards getting them to help you and not, I mean, they don't want to not pay us. I mean, they'd rather be happy and be paying, you know. So I thought, how can I help you, giving you some ideas? I think a lot of this, certainly Anthony brought it up about, you know, local regulations. There are many LA cities have declared landlords must offer rent forgiveness, and it allows the tenant 6 to 12 months to pay after the state of emergency is over. Understanding the difference between LA or the county or Santa Monica or Beverly Hills, wherever your properties are, or, you know, even out of state, understanding the regulations for that specific is going to go a long way to help you to communicate to your tenant how to deal with this issue. Obviously, communicate. Ask for verification. If a tenant comes to you and tells you that they've been laid off, and you obviously know what business they're in, then, you know, you have to find a way. But you are not prohibited from asking them for some verification that this situation, you know, as opposed to a tenant who might just want to take advantage. Hopefully you don't have those tenants. You also want to try to encourage the tenant to pay what they can, because something is better than nothing, especially when we're stuck with the situation where there's no evictions. So in the case that I just explained to you, you know, I agreed to 1/3 off of his rent for the 2 months, with a discussion to follow on how to pay it back, and if it needs to be extended. Basically, set up a repayment plan. This is key, and it also, in doing so, you're helping the tenant to understand what their obligations are, and yet you're helping them, and you're being sympathetic, and compassionate, and that puts them in a position to not want to leave you hanging the bag. The next thing is you really need to talk to lenders to see what program adjustments they're making. When we think about the service providers, some of your loans may be owned by the federal government, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. Others are just serviced by a bureau. Those bureaus can make arrangements with you based on you giving them some explanation of the impact it's having on your property. Usually what the ones that are open to this are extending 3 months of no payment up front and extending your loan 3 months with no penalties, no fees, etc. However, check to see if you qualify for state or federal. You see this here, this SBA economic injury disaster. Let me see if I can show you this as well. Are you seeing this article, this webpage? Anthony, do you see this?
No, it's just your slide.
Okay, so let me go back to the share. Hold on a second. I don't know if all of you have does it let me share everything? Ah, there we go. Okay, do you see this now?
Yep.
This is the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan Emergency. I can send you the link, but basically what this is look at this overview. In response to the pandemic, small business, and that's you. This is territories you're eligible to apply for an economic injury disaster loan advance of up to $10,000. This advance will provide economic relief to businesses that are currently experiencing temporary loss of revenue. Funds will be made available following successful application. The loan advance will not have to be repaid. So if you have a loss, here is a place to go to SBA, this particular economic injury disaster loan emergency advance.
The form is super easy as well. It's 1.5 pages. So I highly recommend that you check that out if you haven't yet.
This, I mean, if you have multiple properties and maybe one of those properties has been hit hard, where the tenant, maybe depending on the area that it's in or the type of occupations those tenants have had, et cetera, as well as those who may have contracted the illness, you can apply for this, and I highly recommend it. It do something as opposed to us sitting back and crying. If you do have some vacancies and you do want to try to get them rented, besides virtual tours, you can use a little bit of mindset. If your property has parking and it's always been included, maybe you advertise it as free parking. Or free parking for 2 years if you charge for your parking. Maybe if you don't allow pets, you might want to consider changing that policy, because people love having their pets, and it's harder to find a nice unit that does allow pets than it is for the ones that don't. And then the other thing I want to share with you is there's a very good article that overviews other ways and other ideas in terms of how to get mortgage relief. Are you seeing this?
Yep.
Okay, good. So forbearance, this will talk to things that you can present to your loan servicers in order to get the forbearance. As opposed to the SBA loan, this is an opportunity where you know, I cannot make my mortgage payment for 3 months and tack it on at the end. For many rental property owners, if we weren't in this environment, you don't really care how long the mortgage is. You're probably not going to hold the property for 30 years, or, you know, I mean, the tenants are paying the mortgage under normal circumstances. So this may become an opportunity to you as well. No penalties and interest, no reporting to the credit bureaus. So this is another resource where you can go to get some ideas. If your loans, and there is a site right here, this mortgage electronic registration system lets you check whether the holder of your mortgage is actually backed by Fannie and Freddie. And if it is, there is relief available to you. Okay, so both Fannie and Freddie have. I have one property that actually is backed by them and the others are not. So for those that are not, I might go to the SBA, but for these, I might go to Fannie and Freddie and get relief. And the federal government is acting much quicker than it has in the past. So forbearance, if it's federally backed. Anyway, those are just some things I wanted to share with you. This is a difficult time for everybody. We are usually a very fortunate group of people, landlords. That's some of those old sayings about landlords make money in their sleep. Right now, a lot of us are very restless. So there are some things that you can do, and don't panic, and don't cause anxiety between you and your tenants. Treat them as humans, be respectful, and I think they'll treat you well as well. And I wish everybody the best of health. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you so much, Mitch. Yeah, I think that's a really, really great way to end this. I mean, hey, we're all in it together. Everybody's struggling a little bit right now. And this month is going to be challenging ahead financially, I think, for a lot of people. But definitely, we would like to make sure you know that we are a resource for you. We're all here to help us get through it. Again, things are changing all the time, so please, you know, stay in touch with us. Let us help you stay up to date with everything that is going on. We are going to be posting this video in case you wanted to share it with anyone at the Collective Realty's YouTube page, as well as our Facebook page. If you want to reach out to any of the panelists, please reach out to me, Anthony, at the Collective Realty, and I'll make sure I get you anybody's info who you need. Again, if you're joining us and you're not part of our meetup group, we would love to have you join that as well. When this is over, we do in-person meetups, and they're a really great chance to network with other investors and hear from different speakers monthly on things that we can offer you to help you with your multifamily investment business. The website to RSVP or just to be part of the meetup group is LAMultifamilymeetup.com. I'll also post that in the chat, LAMultifamilymeetup.com. And in a week from now, we're also going to be hosting a general LA real estate update that's going to cover multifamily issues, but also residential as well. So it'll be a little bit more broad. So stay tuned for that. And if there's anyone else who has anything else to say before we wrap up, please do. Otherwise, just wanted to wish everyone a great weekend. It's hot out there, and you know, we're all in this together. So yeah, go ahead, Mitch.
I just wanted to say that I did post both the SBA funding information link and the the resources for landlord link on the chat page.
Sounds good.
And I just wanted to thank our panelists, Dino and Anthony, for sharing their time with us and their expertise. You know, they're both very busy and they're both excellent professionals. I would highly recommend If you are doing a 1031 exchange, you know, Dino and API, they're fantastic accommodators. And if you have any landlord-tenant issues, please reach out to Anthony Marinaccio. I think they're both fantastic.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. I mean, we really covered a lot, and we look forward to being back with you guys virtually very soon. Have a great weekend, everyone.
You too.